Okay. So welcome everybody, effective questioning techniques. My name's Hilary Nunns and I'm just going to go through with you some of for me, the most important points about questioning in class. The subject really came up because when I was teaching full-time, I was also a teaching and learning coach. And I was lucky enough to get sent on lots of different training courses, and it helped me enormously to understand more about how to improve the motivation of our students and engagement of them in the lesson using questioning techniques, which I applied during my career. So one of the first statements that was made was that questioning in class is underdeveloped. And at that moment, as a teaching and learning coach in a room with other coaches, we were asked to discuss this. We did a bit of research and we were enlightened to the point where the outcome was that 50% of questioning should come from the learner. Now that kind of makes you stop in your tracks, because you assume that a lot of the questioning, it would be from the teacher or the other adults in the room, because you're trying to ascertain how much you know or have picked up. But to keep the motivation going, the idea was to have the questioning split. I made this cloud because I wrote down a lot of reasons for questioning, and we can break it down as we go through, but there are lots of reasons for questioning, and the cloud is so difficult to read that we'll put them into sensible order in a moment. But for me, the most important thing about questioning is that it should arouse curiosity, create some imagination in the young person, or the learner of any age, obviously, and motivate the learners to continue to engage in the lesson. So for me, they're the most important things. And I guess that's because it's from many years of working with students with ADHD that you try to keep them focused. And by stimulating this imagination, it would help them to understand where they fit in to this class and things like that. So let's break down that cloud a bit more. We've got things like the reasons for questioning are to challenge students. I think that's an obvious one. Help them to direct in a particular way. So you want them to think down a path that is going to lead you to the source of the end of the lesson. So you want them to think in that way. But also this one here, controlling behavior, I totally believe that you can do that using questioning. Then we want to encourage everybody to get engaged with questioning, because, you know, if you ask the question and you don't get an answer, you end up either answering it yourself or you have to bounce it over to someone else to ask. And what we want is for all students to be engaged in that process. Yes, we want to assess learning, but that's not the only reason for questioning. Revision is good, obviously, and yes, definitely understand how much your students already know, because then you've got a baseline as to how you're going to proceed in your lesson. So those are all good reasons. We also want to spark further questions, and you can deliberate on that. You can say, tell me more, and things like that. You want to start a discussion, focus on a particular topic. The curiosity side of it, I think that that depends on the age group of your learners, because if they're very, very young, then they won't have a baseline much for this. Identify any gaps in the knowledge, of course, clarify understanding. So checking what you've heard your students reply to you, and to reinforce the things that they've already learned. So that's like the dual coding. So we know the reasons, and what we should be doing when we're creating a lesson plan is to apply this thinking when we're creating our plan. So we know the reasons why, and I want to just for a moment step back and have a look at a typical 50-minute class in which attention falls off very quickly, kind of rolls along the bottom of the low attention span, and then towards the end it gears up a little bit. And what we want to use questioning for is to create more reset opportunities, so re-engage. And here's the idea about that. So you might, I mean, you don't have to do it every 10 minutes, obviously, but the idea would be that a question or an interjection of some kind will reset the engagement, a bit like when you press refresh on your internet. So remember that you should space all these ideas out that I'm giving you now. You don't have to do it all in one class. You don't have to do it every 10 minutes. But the idea of questioning is that you mix it up across the lessons and use it in a way to create more engagement and stimulation. So there are a few ideas I want to give you, and some of them are ones that I've pinched off others, and I will I will tell you where I pinched them from in a moment. But none of them are private, just to me, so that's okay. Here's an idea in action: create action. Put some questions on flip charts around the room, put them up on the wall and put students into groups. They can go and have a look at the question or the task that's on the flip chart. So that's actual physical movement involved there. They can record their thoughts or their answers on a post-it note, stick it onto the flip chart, and then move to the next question or flip chart. I've attended training when they've done this in the classroom, and it absolutely floated my boat, because that's exactly the kind of thing we should be trying to do with learners of a particular age and upwards, especially secondary and in further. Okay, so that's an idea. Get the questions on the flip charts, pop them around the room. Then there's this idea, which is a sorting activity. So you could have headings where it could be true or false or fact or myth or, yes or no, whatever. And then you would cut up the pieces and ask people to put the statements underneath the heading. The sorting activities. Those are the sorts of things that you would expect to see with older students, but there's no reason why you can't do it with a lot of age groups to understand or get them to understand where they are. Now here's one, an engagement activity, and this is from Joanne Miles Consulting. Joanne Miles, M-I-L-E-S, Consulting. I should look her up if I were you, because on her website, there's an awful lot of things here. So this idea is to show the students the next topic or the module that you're going to be starting and ask them to come up with 4 questions that they want answered. So that's giving them this thinking ahead and positioning themselves within that next module or topic. They've got a chance to think it through and come up with things they want answered. So you're giving them the opportunity to think about it. Then, of course, there's linking and applying. This is how you relate the questions to real life. And again, this would be age related. It's not always possible, but when you're planning a lesson, think of the link to real life. And it could be that most of your lessons, you couldn't do this, but some of them you could. And this is just a tool that you might use for some of your lessons where you can relate it to real life. And then the learner will apply this knowledge in a more sort of effective way, that they know what's in it for them, to learn this stuff when they know what's going to happen in their life. So you can frame questions to discover what's in it for me. And this kind of goes with linking and applying, and could well be at older students again, but change the language to suit the age group. So why might you need to know this? And what impact will it have on you if you don't have this information? Which part of your life can you see that this would be something useful to you, etc., etc.? So change the language to suit the age group, and I think you could apply this in a lot of circumstances. Now, I quite like this. This is silent answering. So although it is questioning, you're going to ask the question, and you're going to ask your students to answer using a voting card. This is a great idea if your ears are bleeding. So if you've got a particularly noisy vocal group, then it's got to be absolute hush, and you hold up a card. Now, you can't get the sense of size on this. It's a bit bigger than a credit card, the ones I've got on here. The beauty of this is if you ask a closed question and you have yes or no or true or false, then you'd ask the students to hold up the card, and you could have an instant visual of whether or not they've really understood the bit that you've just taught. So that's an instant feedback for you. And if many have given you the wrong answer, then you've got to go back over it quite quickly. Then you do expect everyone to answer. So everyone that's engaged would have a card and they've just got to hold it up. Okay, so that's multiple choice as well, A, B, C, D, have some multiple choice questioning options there for that. So that's a few thoughts there you could do for silent answering. We've also got here some question cubes. Again, you can apply this to any subject, any age group. If you're looking for a tactile activity, then you could even get your students to make the cube if you created it. But one of the nice ways to do it also to get interaction is to get the students to write their own. So you could give them a blank cube template, get them to ask you questions, and then swap them with another group, and they have to roll the cube. Once they've made it, roll the cube, and whatever comes up on the top, that's the question that they have to answer. Now, the thing about this is that, you know, this is just a prop in a way. It's the same kind of questioning that you would expect to do, but you're just using a prop, and it makes it more interactive, much more likely that your students will engage. And if you use the dice, you see there's a couple there at the top, that could just be questions 1 to 12 or 1 to 6, a written question, and all they have to do is roll the die to say which questions they answer. So you're going to have to answer them all, but it's adding a prop or an extra dimension. So just to recap, use more than one method across different lessons. Try wherever possible to get the students to ask the questions. They reckon 50% it should be. Not always easy, but there's some ideas there. And create props and movement to help with engagement in your class. So next time we are going to look at behaviour, a bit of more of an extension on the setting classroom boundaries, which we did earlier in the term. So I'm just going to do a little bit more on behaviour, just about positive behaviour management in class. And just to let you know that if you're looking for any resources, so there's a cube template on my website. If you go onto the website, click on the resources tab, you can pick up an awful lot of all of these resources we've just talked about today.